Hey, I finally thought about it. Mayang buntag, mayang hapon, mayang gabi to everyone. Yeah, we're still stuck in the office again. Yeah, I'm trying to type notes and do some things that Cindy would normally do. Which also includes me doing a sound check to make sure that everything's working right. And I ain't got to go back and redo this one again. Which would probably help if I like actually wore my glasses and could actually see what I'm doing here. Ah, you'll have to excuse me, people. Just please bear with me. All right, now how's everybody doing today? Hey, I can hear myself. I'm doing great. All right, now I got to figure out how to shut the sound off on this stupid thing. Yeah, it's not the elegant solution, but it's a solution. There, yeah, I'm just not going to use this one today. Okay. Now you guys have my undivided attention for the next little bit. Ah, shoot. Yeah, I promised to do one other thing too. And I'm going to send a couple of links in Messenger. I'm not sure who all's here, so I'm just generally sending links to everybody that I would normally send one to. So you'll have to bear with me, people. But I'm unquestionably flying solo today, so uh, yeah, I can't remember the name of the person. One of the people I'm supposed to send this to. Yeah, welcome to my life. One of these days, we ought to try this on Facebook Messenger and do an in mass group call. That could be kind of cool. There we go. I think I'm here with everybody. Good morning, all. Mayang buntag, mayang hapon, mayang gabi, no matter where you are in the world. That Cindy did say that there. Okay, the empty chair. Cindy, well, actually, this chair. Cindy is at her prenatal exam, and I know what I forgot to do. So she had to go in for that first thing this morning, and stereotypical Filipino thing that she goes in at 8 o'clock, yet the doctors don't show up until uh, 10 o'clock. So, but if she's not there, uh, and if she waits until 10 o'clock to get there, well, all the people that got there at 8 o'clock are going to be in line. So it's going to be 1 o'clock before she gets seen. And yeah, it's kind of crazy. Sorry about that. And just, again, welcome to the Philippines. Maoni sa Pilipinas. Okay, I think I got everybody this time. Unfortunately, there used to be a way to send out a mass message on Business Suite, or I thought there was, but I searched and I couldn't find it. You can find a few. They have an app for that. You can find a few plug-in apps that do a mass message, but not the Facebook page business manager thingy itself. So yeah, I'm struggling with trying to figure out a lot of this stuff and trying to get any of that stuff figured out. And yeah, welcome to our life. It's not bad. I'm learning a little bit more each day, and I'm going to take this time to start playing with that. David and I were talking earlier this morning, and part of it is I've got an overlay for the OBS that's the same overlay I use on the phone when I do my mobile live streaming. And I'm going to start playing with that this week. And that would actually allow me to indirectly invite people into the live stream with us and do that in a way. And I want to play with it once or twice before I start using it here to actually do the live stream and see if there's any kinks and get any kinks that I can get worked out before I subject everybody on that comes every day to that situation. But the live streams are going to hopefully start improving a little bit more. And I'm hoping to get a little bit more interaction with people in real time with this, and to have like a weekly guest, a weekly guest appearance that would be on here with me to do this live and to be able to speak as well. Yeah, I realize if I do that, the camera focuses on that table back there, so that's probably not a good thing. You're going to have to see me fidgeting a little bit by myself today. David and I actually got talking about the situation going on, and I think we talked about this yesterday, that there's a worldwide nurse shortage because the Philippines stopped allowing healthcare providers to go OFW and to fill a lot of that role that they do. And we got talking about the healthcare systems, and he talked about New Zealand's system, and I talked about the U.S.'s system. And that kind of led to a discussion about the legal system in the U.S. and how insanely sue happy the U.S. gets. And I worked in the City of Phoenix Streets Department for 20 years. And we ran across all kinds of different situations. And the Streets Department is the third most sued department in the City of Phoenix. And police and fire duke it out for number one every year. And the Streets happily, merrily goes along in third, and periodically bumps up to one or two, depending on how bad of a year or good of a year they've had with lawsuits. And one year we actually did manage to go into number one, I believe, that year for that year that this lawsuit got settled. I'd kind of like to do this on a live when I've got the app going, but I'll just do it today by speaking it. And The city of Phoenix, the streets department is responsible for reinstalling barricades and that type of stuff as well. And there was one barricade that we went to. There was a wooden plank barricade, and these posts are 8x8 posts, and they're buried 3 feet underground, and then compacted so that they're not moving. And typically, you take a bobcat, put a piece of chain on it, and you can just pop those posts out by pulling straight up on them with a bobcat. Maybe bump it once or twice to loosen it up and then pop it out. But usually, by the time they've been accident, you can just pop them straight out. And we sat here and fought with these stupid things, and they didn't come out, and they didn't come out. And we bumped them, and finally broke one. And notice it's in concrete. And we were sitting there, what in the world? And so we broke out jackhammers and busted up some concrete. It was maybe 2 inches deep concrete. And we were kind of scratching our head. Did somebody, pour out concrete or wash out a mixer or something? And all the rest of them were like that. And so, morning, Mr. Ivan. Morning, Mr. Philippine Experience. How are you guys doing today? And so at the end of the day, when we went back, because this took us way longer to get those stupid things out than we expected. Normally, you could replace a barricade in a day, and we kind of felt like idiots, just barely getting the posts out in a day. There was like eight or nine. There was quite a few posts. There was 6 or 8 posts. And so we got talking with a foreman and the yard supervisor and asked him about it. And the supervisor said, yeah, that he forgot to remind us on that one. And related this story to us that about 5 years previously, some guy on a motorcycle came down, and this street is a collector street, and there's 2 streets that dead end like this, and you have to make a turn. And there's barricade here that in this area they have a drainage canal. It's ACDC, Arizona Canal Drainage Canal, or Diversion Canal or something like that. That it's one of the main runoffs where a lot of the rainwater is funneled into it. And so it's a pretty big and deep cement canal, but it's typically empty. And there's this wooden barricade that's within a few feet of where the turn makes. And then about 15 feet past that, there's a chain link fence. And then there's a the collector between 43rd and 51st, and the Indian School and Camelback and Indian School. It's right where the city of Phoenix border goes from 51st to 43rd. In Thomas and Indian School, that general area. But I'll send you a link, Google Maps link where that's at the end of this. That's part of the reason why I wanted to do this on a live stream, that I have the app running that I could show people, and this would make a lot more sense being seen. But past that chain link fence, there's 2 wrought iron fences for a walkway that goes on the walking path on the side of this canal. That this dude went through that barricade, both of those, or that chain link fence, both of those wrought iron fences, probably probably 15 meters, 40 feet or so across this canal and planted himself head first into that wall. He wasn't wearing a helmet. He was obviously insanely speeding, and what was on a motorcycle was severely intoxicated and wound up being a vegetable for the rest of his life. Amazingly, the dude survived. But his family sued the city of Phoenix for failure to provide adequate engineering controls to keep him from doing that. And they successfully won to the tune of $7 million. And so the engineers downtown, what more can we do? And that's why these particular barricades posts have to be cemented in, have a cement collar on them, and better engineering controls to keep drunk people that are speeding on motorcycles without a helmet from hurting themselves. And that's the shape of the American legal system. I meant to look up the term, and if somebody on here happens to know it, that there's actually a legal term for not being able to have sex with your partner. And that's illegal grounds to sue a company or an entity over. That we've had that a couple times, that the city of Phoenix was sued because somebody tripped and hurt themselves and weren't able to have sex with their spouse or significant other. And that allows the spouse to sue the entity. And we've been sued by a spouse for that repeatedly. We actually have a division for the city of Phoenix. It's called risk management. That's their entire job, is going through and investigating and putting out little fires like this. Each yard in the city of Phoenix has a rapid responder that if anything like this happens, they immediately go there and start doing photo and video of the situation to turn over to risk management. And anytime that risk management has claims like this, that the rapid responder has to go and do investigations as to what happened and whose liability was it. And it's insane. Michael, if you've worked for MDOT, MCDOT, I'm certain you dealt with these type situations repeatedly, that in our border areas where we overlap to Maricopa County, that we've had issues like that. And the legal system in the U.S. is just so stinking insane that it's dragging the medical system down. Decades ago, when I was still living in New York, Reader's Digest had a big article about it, the malpractice system at that point. And what made it stick out and remember in my mind is Pittsburgh. The county that Pittsburgh is in, and 3 or 4 of those rural counties in that area don't have any obstetricians practicing in there. And they are severely limited on pediatric care in that area. That Pittsburgh has a few, but not as many as you would expect for a city the size of Pittsburgh. And the smaller rural counties, you got to go into Pittsburgh to find it. Otherwise, you got to go to Philadelphia on the other side of the state to find much prenatal or pediatric care and get away from these rural counties. Pittsburgh, because of the Steelers and not the team, but the reason they're named the Steelers, the steel industry in that area and all of the coal mining and everything else that historically was there, that there's several EPA hazard sites in that area. And there was a bunch of birth defects and such right after the EPA got created that were stemmed back to these, the birth defects were stemmed back to these EPA sites. And that obstetricians were getting sued for stuff that they didn't even know about and successfully sued. And even the ones that weren't cost their malpractice insurance a ton of money to defend. And finally, it got to the point where the malpractice insurance companies had to raise the rates or just flat out pull the insurance from these counties. And the couple of malpractice insurance companies that were left that were willing to do it, the rates were so insanely high that the obstetricians couldn't afford it and still maintain a practice. And so that they wound up closing down. But yeah, that my sister that worked for the nurse that worked for the VA, that she had to have her own private malpractice insurance to work at the VA, as well as the VA's malpractice insurance that she fell in under, as well as the doctor's malpractice insurance that they had to carry that covered the nurses that were working for them on top of them. And so, yeah, it's just doctors and nurses and doctors make some crazy amounts of money in the U.S. I'm not going to disagree with that, but a lot of it goes back to the insurance and the liability that they carry. And when these lawsuits run around on these doctors and these hospitals, everybody that's even looked at the chart, let alone seen somebody, and it winds up being named in these lawsuits, and that it just gets so stinking insane. Ivan, yes, he is. Yeah, that it's somebody will hit a pothole and tear up a tire, and all of a sudden you're replacing the front end on the car, you're replacing the tire, you're replacing the rim, you're going for whiplash and everything else, and it just gets insane. And that Michael, you said you were a civil engineer for them. That tell me that that's not part of your job. And designing some of these things is looking at how much liability are we going to carry if we design it, this way versus this way. It's not releasing the medical community and the pharmaceutical community completely from the issues. But a lot of the issues that they deal with are the liability. And there was a smoking cessation drug that came out 8-10 years ago. I was still working. So it had to have been about 8-10 years ago at this point, called Chantix. And I'm geek enough. Yeah. I am geek enough that I when I get a new prescription that I'll read through that 50-page pamphlet. And in that 50-page pamphlet, that there was a notation buried deep in the pamphlet about somebody that had committed suicide while taking it during the trials. And they noted in the pamphlet that the person, after being reviewed, did have suicidal tendencies prior to the trials, and because of other mental health issues should have never been allowed in the trials, but they failed to disclose that when they applied for the trials. And so because of that, were dismissed. The suicide in the patient was dismissed from the trials after they committed suicide. Well, after successfully completing all of their trials and that was released to the public. And within 90 days of being released to the market, there was a class action suit that if you thought about suicide, if you committed suicide, if you know someone, if a family member committed suicide, if you knew somebody that committed suicide, if you thought about knowing somebody that committed suicide, come join our class action lawsuit and hold this pharmaceutical company responsible for the damages that they've caused. And so, yeah, the legal system bears the bulk of the responsibility for the situation the American healthcare system is in. And that happened in the US, that it was a McDonald's thing. Yes, there is a little bit more to the story than is apparent. But at the same time, part of the actions of McDonald's at that point that created the situation that she burned herself very badly with were actually to comply with other regulations and other lawsuits that McDonald's had faced in the past. And so it was the situation that created that lawsuit was actually created by previous lawsuits and regulations from lawsuits. And I get that companies and entities do need to be held responsible for their liability in marketing stuff, and that there does need to be standards of liability and such. But the U.S. has gotten completely out of hand and to the point where the system is all but unworkable. Morning, Mr. Daniel Ford. How are you doing today? And good morning, Mr. Paul. Yeah, guys, definitely. Hook up on Facebook. It's a really cool thing, and like I say, it might be an interesting way in run around Zoom meeting, having that 40-minute cap on it. But there again, if we get enough interest, I'll consider subscribing to it. That it's like $150 a year for the subscription. Urban IB is one of them that has gotten hacked and a few other issues. So he's got multiple Facebook accounts. But like I say, that if you guys have other experiences, please feel free to share them. That it's the legal system in the U.S. is horribly broken in way more ways than you can possibly imagine. And it's not good. And I can't even come up with a wild solution that would be a legitimate solution. There's situations where in Montana or Wyoming, a guy got off that the legal books that they gave the street names, the trade name, the pharmaceutical name, and then they gave the chemical name for methamphetamines, I believe. And the chemical names are insanely long. but they are considered to be the most specific name and the most accurate name. And when the printer printed the actual law books, they transposed 2 letters in a 44-letter name for the chemical name of this thing. And even transposed, it was a legitimate chemical compound, but not this one. And some legal clerk managed to realize that and use that, gave that to the lawyer that used it to get a client off of sale, use, possession charges, and everything else, because the chemical name, the most specific name, was not the drug that he was carrying, even though the drug that he was carrying matched the trade name, the everything else, but the most specific name was not correct. So therefore, it wasn't what he was actually carrying, even though all the other ones were right. And Charlie Daniels did a song years ago about living by the law. That today's society is starting to live by law of the jungle, not by the law, the law of the land. And it's, yeah. If anything, it was more prophetic today than it was in the era that he wrote it. And I hate to say it, but the legal community, in my opinion, bears the brunt and the burden of responsibility for a lot of the things going on today. And it's just gotten insane. No, I don't think I've ever sued anybody for that type of stuff. I've threatened it a couple times. I've got some hearing issues, and work was giving me garbage, and I used the ADA protection to threaten compliance and to help and encourage them to come up with a workable, reasonable solution. But yeah, that's got to be pretty much standard policy in the U.S. today, that if you don't get your way, you find a reason to threaten lawsuits and use that as a club more than a tool. And so sadly, yeah. I was indirectly named in one of these lawsuits. That again, at work, that one of the projects we did that I was part of, that again, the lawyers, when they do this stuff, that they name everybody and their brother that's ever looked at it or touched it. And the crew that I was on was actually named by name in one of these lawsuits. And so we actually wound up having to go down and meet with our risk management department and sign a bunch of paperwork to allow them to represent us individually as well as collectively, because through the city of Phoenix. So yeah, that was kind of a hairy situation, because I didn't know what was going to go on with that. But yeah, it welcome to Phoenix. Welcome to life here in the U.S. It's not quite that bad, Ivan. But yeah, that I am a huge second rights advocate, but yeah, that Phoenix at times is can be a poster child for gun control because of the random shootings that do happen. That road rage gets insane, and people pull out a pistol and start shooting, and it's the U.S. is not the place that I grew up in. The U.S. today is not the place that I grew up in. And growing up, you'd get into conflicts with people, and you'd yell and you'd scream, and occasionally there'd be a fist fight, but you wouldn't even consider pulling out a gun and shooting somebody. We had an incident with the city of Phoenix that a crew was doing what we call crack seal, putting those little black lines on the cracks in asphalt. And somebody came out with a gun and threatened them that if they didn't leave, because he was a day sleeper and we were making way too much noise. And they called the police. They called the foreman who called the police. And yeah, that situation got stupid. I don't entirely know what's going on with the U.S., but yeah, it's definitely not the place that I remember growing up, which is part of my fascination with the Philippines. Is here stuff like that happens, but not more like it did when I was a kid. We had one of my hometown. You can look this up. We had one of the early school shootings, and this one actually happened over the Christmas break. So school wasn't in session, and the kid used the building to shoot from, the high school to shoot from. And there were a few people. There was a custodian that I knew, and someone else from the building maintenance people. Custodian I knew was killed, and I believe a couple others were injured. But there was 6 or 10 people killed that he shot just randomly walking by. A friend of mine, his father was a gas meter reader that had hurt himself a day or two beforehand, and was out that day. And it was a relief worker that was out there that wound up getting shot. But yeah, that was crazy. But that was an isolated incident that you never heard about stuff like that. And especially for it to happen in such a small town. But and the other thing too is nobody blamed the school, nobody blamed the parents or anything else. The kid just freaked out, and it had some issues that needed to be dealt with that unfortunately didn't. And it was a sad incident, but nobody started blaming anybody, other than the kid that did it. And he hung himself in prison, in jail, before they could even get him to trial. And sadly, David, that's actually happening in the U.S. and part of the depending on who you talk to, part of the reason why that is getting to be a problem. The immigration system that's so horribly broken. My sister lives in the state of Washington, and there was an incident that made major news here a few years ago, that the INS caught somebody that was part of the cartel, just a foot soldier with a cartel, and instead of holding them, deported them. And that they sent them back into Mexico, and the plane went down to Mexico, dropped them off, went back to LA or San Diego or wherever the INS regional headquarters would be for there, and had maintenance work done, and then before it went back to Seattle. And because of that, the people actually beat the person actually beat the plane back to Seattle, and had his arresting officer dead before the plane made it back to Seattle, the Seattle office. And at that point he was kept and locked up. But yeah, it's I don't know, and believe it or not, a lot of the immigration system is due to legal issues. And I love the rights that we have in the U.S. And please do not take any of my comments as complaining about them. But the rights come with responsibilities that are not being administered to. And so because of that, it's gotten to the point where everybody wants the rights without the responsibility, and everybody thinks a lot of privileges are rights. And people are so disconnected from the problems that they're trying to solve or think they're trying to solve that the solutions they come up with are completely bizarre and don't have any real world application, to the point where the solutions cause more problems than they solve. Michael and Heidi made comment, that a lot of the engineering solutions that they come up because of designing to minimize lawsuits winds up causing problems due to engineering design to minimize lawsuits, which occasionally wind up causing the lawsuits that they were designed to prevent. And so I have no problem with taking a company or a person or an entity to task over genuine liability that they've caused. But it's gotten to the point where there's actually people that do fall under ADA, the Americans with Disability Act. That was the act that was created in '86, I believe, created in the '80s, that it gave the enforcement of laws and such to help the Americans with disabilities. And overall, it was a good thing. But again, welcome to the lawyers that they've taken it and used it and created insane situations. And at this point, there's actually disabled individuals that their primary income is suing businesses and threatening to sue businesses for minor violations and such that are that they're violations, but they've never been a problem. And quite often the people are willing in more than effort to put into helping somebody that is disabled to get through and to serve them. But because it's not correct to the letter, that they complain and threaten lawsuits and wind up getting settlements, or sometimes wind up putting the business out of business. And my apologies about getting into a huge political rant today, but this probably won't, and hopefully won't happen frequently, but there's a very good chance it may never happen again. But now that David Brown and I got talking about the legal system in the U.S. and the medical system, and he made comment about the taxes and such, supporting it, and it's not a bad thing. And I brought up that anytime that socialized medicine gets talked about in the U.S. through a lot of reasons, that it gets insane amounts of resistance. And that a lot of the problems with the U.S.'s medical system are due to these insane lawsuits. And until the legal system gets fixed, that's actually causing the problem, the medical system's not going to get fixed. There will not be a workable solution in the medical system, in the Medicare system, until the legal system gets fixed. As long as hospitals and doctors and entities have to worry about these lawsuits and have to carry such insane amounts of malpractice insurance, they're not going to get fixed. And right now, they're trying to use the medical system to do this and to institute a lot of this. That's not going to happen. And we also got talking about I can, and this is my opinion only, I can see this current situation being a means, and this would be a means to get the U.S.'s legal system out of it. Oh, we do. We absolutely love suing each other. It's for some people, it's literally a pastime. But I can see this current situation, and there's already some of it in place that Daniel made comment that I didn't realize is the U.S., Canada, UK, Australia have reciprocal licensing agreements for medical personnel. And I can see this as a justification for someone like the WHO, the WHO, the World Health Organization, to step in and say, because of this situation and the craziness that it caused and such, that it really needs to be under an international organization, and having the healthcare system removed from countries' hands and placed into an international oversight organization, so that a lot of the policies that could have been made smoother if they were all under one universal worldwide policy would, that it would cause less problems. And the countries that already have not one world order, but one world medical order, or one world order for medicine. And I could see this as being the early justification for that system. And the companies like Canada and New Zealand and such that already have socialized medicine to some degree or another, and that the government already basically oversees their in the U.S. that would never happen. The government has tried that. And this is part of what's causing the vaccine issues in the U.S. Rubella, the MDAP or whatever it is, the rubella vaccines and crap like that, a few years back. This happened quite a while back. Started getting sued too heavily to the point where the pharmaceutical companies just stopped importing them into the U.S. That they still manufacture them for the rest of the world, but they just stopped importing them and doing any manufacturing of them in the U.S. And so that shot up the price to insane amounts and made it, nearly impossible to get them. And so again, as the problem got worse, the government finally stepped in and said, "What's going on?" and such. And the manufacturers flat out told me, hey, we're getting sued left and right, and it's just not worth it. There's no profit in it, and it's hurting our bottom line. So we're just going to stop making them or stop selling them in the U.S. And so the government said, okay, well, you've got a point, and we'll create I can't remember the exact name of it, but it's a vaccine fund that removes the vaccine manufacturer's liability from being sued for most vaccines. And that put the people that were marginal over the edge and gave them even more grounds to say, well, yeah, you see that these vaccines are so dangerous. The government had to step in and remove the liability from manufacturers, which magnified the problem and made the situation insanely worse. And didn't necessarily create the anti-vaxxers. There were people around that had problems with them, but it horribly magnified the problem, and it gave them way more justification in their minds for being the way they are, which actually fed into the lawyers, which gave them even more clients to start suing people because the government now regulated the insurance, and it just got stupid. That so that they actually did try that. Police are somewhat protected by lawsuits, but unfortunately that the laws are interpreted by the judges, and this is true, I believe, worldwide, or in most Western countries at least, that the laws are interpreted by the judges, and so it just depends on what sitting judge, how much protection the police have. And right now, because of all the insane racial issues, that the police are finding that they don't have a whole lot of protection with the more liberal critical race theory judges sitting on the benches. And whenever a judge does side with the police, you get months of rioting. And so yeah. And again, it goes back to the legal system has been so insanely out of whack for so long that people just don't see it as any other possible way. And so until they go in and start fixing the legal system, there is no repair to the system. And you got to stop and think, the vast majority of politicians are lawyers. That's where they come from. Biden is a career lawyer. Well, he's a career politician, but he was a trained lawyer. That was his schooling. He graduated Syracuse University Law School. And it's gotten, the legal system has gotten so far out of hand. Politicians write laws to patch up other laws, and you pretty much have to be a lawyer to understand the laws that they write. It's how we get 2,000-page infrastructure bills that really don't address much actual infrastructure, but address other laws and try to create other law. And yeah, it's It's horribly insane in the US. And yes, there are people that do that. They go around looking for reasons to sue each other because a good lawsuit is basically almost like winning the lottery. Most of these class action lawsuits that do get settled for millions of dollars, the actual people, the actual class, see minimal amounts of money. That it's the lawyers and law firms that wind up seeing the lion's share of it, and that's part of the reason why these lawyers love these class action suits that go insane. And so they go after any possible lawsuit that could be. And so until you go in and do some kind of major reform to the legal system, it's not going to happen as long as you got lawyers that are the politicians writing these laws. The legal system's not going to get reformed. So I don't know a workable, good solution for it. And my apologies about carrying on such a huge rant on this one today. I appreciate the guys that have stuck around and listened to this and the input that you give it. But I'm actually going to end this one a little bit early. I'm not going to go the full 1 hour. I'm kind of thankful I'm not monetized because I could see this one having some issues with that, and hopefully it's not going to get flagged anyhow. But I appreciate the support and the humor that you guys have had. Anybody that hasn't signed up to the Phils to Phoenix Facebook page, definitely go sign up. That I'm trying to send out messages before I start these live streams. Tomorrow, if somebody would like to give me a hand with a live stream, I'm going to do a little bit of practice. And what I'm going to do is try and include a Facebook Live messenger call into the live stream. And so I'm going to check out and see how that works and see how that can go. But for today, from Cebu City, Guadalupe, mabuhay.